everyone. My name is Brian Addison. I'm the co-founder and editor of Longbeachize and a writer here in Long Beach. First off, I want to thank the funders and sponsors that actually made this possible. The Long Beach Community Foundation, through the Knight Foundation, Imprint Culture Media Lab, a subsidiary of Intertrend Communications, Pacros and De Los Reyes Attorneys, Streets Blog LA, Hotel Maya, City Fabric, and of course the Art Theater. I'm going to hand it off to Jan to start our esteemed panel as soon as possible, but I did at least want to explain what prompted me to create this series. For those who know me, I have a very active online media presence, and I've been writing about this city for about a decade. And with that, I've been put in a box, and I realized that through digital communication, everyone's kind of put in a box. So there's no amount of sound, nonpartisan, academically backed research I can provide you. If it doesn't fit your worldview, since it's coming from me, you'll reject it. And I thought about this digital divide heavily, and I figured that an old school return to face-to-face dialogue is the best way to overcome that. So I'm really proud of this series, and I'm actually particularly proud of this night's event, and I want to thank Jan and the Art Theater and the filmmakers and the speakers. It's going to be great. So I hope that we have some informed, compassionate dialogue, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jan.
All right, thank you so much for attending tonight. We are very happy that you're here. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds. As we've done in the tradition of this, we like to start with making a statement. And by making a statement, it's the group of us that sort of get together. We start talking about this topic. We start educating ourselves on this topic. And we like to open up on at least ourselves what we agree on. And I stole this one, and I stole it from two of our speakers, because it was better than what I had written. And I didn't take the whole thing, but I took most of it. So our statement tonight is that every man, woman, and child should be trusted, should be treated with dignity and respect. We must work together to solve homelessness, and no one entity, government included, can solve this problem. So that's what we went in with. And with that, I'd like our speakers to come up, and we're going to get started. So tonight, we have 5 speakers, and that includes the producer, the director, and Judge Kirk Mitchell, who I think we all know now. We also have 2 speakers who I think you're going to find fascinating. I hope so. Colin Bertasky. They are both doctoral students at UCI of sociology, and they've been working for several years studying the homeless situation in Orange County. And one of the things we're going to try to do tonight is we saw a film that I think spoke to our emotions, but we're also going to talk about facts, because facts are critical if we're going to solve this problem. And oh, sorry, Sarah, I missed. Colin, you're very important too. Sarah. Oh, darn it. You shouldn't have said the whole thing about the Spanish accent. Sarah Vilata, also a doctoral student at UCI School of Sociology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the filmmakers to talk a little bit about their film. And you're going to have to share the mic. This is an old joke, but we're a nonprofit theater. We have 2 microphones, so they have to share. And so you're going to pass it along. But what I would like, my question to you is, why did you make this film? And this is to Gabby and Mark. Why did you make this film, and what was your reason?
As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from the United States. I grew up in former East Germany, and I have never seen any homelessness in my country. So Mark picked me up hitchhiking in East Germany, and I wound up in the United States.
Former communist, current capitalist now. But yeah, I picked Gabi up hitchhiking. We moved to the United States. Long story. Anyway, we're living downtown L.A. We went out to dinner one night, and we couldn't find a parking spot. So I said, we'll just pull around the corner. We turned the corner, and there was 400 or 500 people living in the street. I was stunned. I grew up in New York. I remember seeing homeless people, but nothing like this. And that was Gabi's first exposure to anything like that. Okay, fast forward a few years, we read an article in the LA Times about a running club started by a judge, and they run around Skid Row through downtown. Gabi runs every day. She was saying, oh, let's run with these people. I'm going like, I don't know. And we started running. We met the judge right away, and we said we had this idea maybe to do a documentary. And the judge said, look, why don't you guys run first with us, and then we'll see how it pans out. And then we started running with the group, and we suggested the idea. Not everybody was totally in favor of it, and then that began the project over 4 years ago. So we filmed for just about 4 years, really, and then you saw, tonight.
Is this your first documentary that you've made?
No.
It's our last one, yeah. We Gabi's from Eastern Europe. We did something about the fall of the Berlin Wall. We did 2 documentaries about Berlin and Cold War material. But this was our first one that took so long. Usually our projects were 1 hour. This is like feature length, and we just started shooting, and then it takes time. It's not unusual for a documentary to take 4 years.
And how did you fund this venture? Because clearly
We're still paying for it.
Okay.
But no, we did not get any grants. We borrowed some money from a friend. We sold Amazon stock. But this was a lesson for Gabi. She, after the first year, she was having cold feet, saying, I don't know if this is worth it, because it costs a lot of money. And then I said, okay, this is your first real lesson in being in the West, being free. You have a choice. Do you want to continue telling this story, or do you want to give up?
And we didn't give up. I was inspired, actually. I mean, after we have spent so much time with the runners, and especially Judge Mitchell, we could never give up. I said, this story has to be told, and whatever it takes, we pull out all the stops and get it told.
So your first experience as an American was to go into debt, making a film.
Deeply.
Judge Mitchell, if you don't mind, how was this experience for you? Obviously, you had been working with this group, and suddenly you have cameras following you around. It's a different level of exposure. How did you feel about that? And how do you feel about the end result?
The end result is wonderful. The end result, in my opinion, captures the essence of what I have been doing on Skid Row for the last 7 years. And I was receptive because anybody who knows a Raphael or a Ben or Rebecca, Brian, the countless people that have become an important part of my life because of the running club, they have backstories that need to be told. So often, whether you're incarcerated, if you're homeless, if you're a drug addict, you're presented in a one-dimensional manner. And one of the real hopes I have, and what I believe Mark and Gabi were successful in doing, is to acquaint the audience that these people lead just as meaningful, complex, complicated, conflicted lives as everybody in this theater. And I think it's important, that we just don't say addict. We just don't say homeless, okay? We understand there is a human being behind that label, and that's what this film does.
Would you mind restating the quote that your son said, and how does that apply to this situation?
Well, it's horribly appropriate. Of course, yesterday was the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's death. And that I became familiar with that quote because it is Martin Luther King's favorite quote from Dante. And the line goes, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in a time of great moral crisis seek to maintain their neutrality." Okay? And I just want to acquaint everybody. The reason I know that is because I learned it from Martin Luther King.
All right. Before we move on, I have a quiz, a little quiz. So Sarah and Colin have done years of study in Orange County, and the report that we've just passed out is the executive summary of that. Don't look at it yet. We're going to get to that in a second. Don't jump ahead. But what's not in that report is a number I have written on this piece of paper. Two numbers, actually. Does anybody have any idea how many homeless people were not? We already saw the number for Los Angeles County, but the number of homeless people in Orange County and in Long Beach. Does anybody want to guess a number? Let's start with Long Beach because that's where really we're here in Long Beach. In Long Beach, 50,000, 1,800. All right. The number is, based on the HUD survey, 2017, 1,863. I would have guessed much higher myself. And we have, if anyone here, we did a speaking engagement on affordable housing a few months ago. We have about 160,000 apartment units in the city. We have about 30,000 affordable type in the model units. It does seem like we could do something for 1,863 people. And we're going to get to that in just a second, and we're going to start with you two. Your report is titled "The Cost of Homelessness to Our Community." What is the cost of homelessness? And you're going to be speaking to Orange County. We're going to extrapolate that back to Long Beach. But to your report, your work, what is the cost of homelessness to our community?
So, can you all hear me? Okay, great. So after, okay, like that? Okay. So after, years of rigorous study and intensive research design, we were able to collect data from several sources. These include the data from the county, from 34 municipalities across Orange County. We were also able to collect data from different hospitals and health organizations, including ambulatory services, and from the nonprofit sector as well. Aside from that, we were able to collect over 250 interviews from homeless individuals. And with all of that data combined, we were able to come to what we like to call a conservative estimate, because it is on the lower end, but a conservative estimate of $299 million for the 2015-2016 fiscal year. So that's what the system is investing as a whole into this problem, and it seems to be getting bigger. So we wanted to figure out how can we invest these funds in a more efficient way that would actually, really get at the problem. So yeah.
Thank you. So what we're talking about is $299 million for Orange County, one fiscal year. And this is for ambulatory services, costs of these, basically the cost of having a homeless population. Now, according to the census from HUD, Orange County had 4,792 homeless individuals in 2017. That's a lot, but Orange County is big, and that's actually not that many. So they're spending $299 million for a problem that they're not solving. And by the way, so are we. If we took the same numbers on a per average person, Long Beach is spending $115 million a year for those 1,863 people. And you're telling me we can't solve this problem. And so now the question, and going right back to you and Judge Mitchell, why haven't we solved this problem? I mean, we're spending a ton of money. It's clearly a need. It seems to be getting worse. We saw some evidence of success tonight by your efforts, but why haven't we solved the problem? Why aren't we doing better? What are the restrictions to making this problem better?
I see a lot of people in the political domain. Their intentions are good, but we just heard last week Mayor Garcetti announced that by 2028 that there would be no homelessness in Los Angeles. And of course, I kept reading the article and listening to the news story, and that's a wonderful projection. But I never saw an explanation as to how that was going to be accomplished. And I just don't think the powers that be have figured out how do you spend the resources available to alleviate the problem. And one of the things that I've learned in my limited efforts to address the issue, it really requires the infusion of a tremendous amount of commitment on behalf of people. The Ben Shirleys, the David Askews, the Becca Hayeses, their lives are not turned around without a prolonged period of support, encouragement, guidance, counseling, education, support to prevent relapse, people who suffer from mental illness, to provide the necessary mental health services, those type of wraparound services, those type of services on a prolonged basis that require a tremendous amount of infusion of human capital. I just don't see that as being marshaled at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, to give a, I don't know, to add on to with a boring academic answer, I think that was very well said. In our experience in Orange County, which you may be reading articles in the LA Times and stuff, that the Santa Ana riverbed was cleared out, and the Orange County Board of Supervisors has been sort of yo-yoing back and forth on how to deal with this problem. So for us, from our vantage point, having gone out and talked to people at these different levels and been in these meetings, I think part of the issue is sort of failure or a hesitancy to acknowledge A, that there is a problem, and B, that people experiencing homelessness are part of our community. In the report, which you can glance at later, of the 252 people we talked to, 68% of them were living in Orange County for 10 years or more, which is as high as it went. So people were, born and raised in Orange County, and one of the stereotypes that people always say is that people come from elsewhere because the weather's good, and in our case, that's just not entirely true. So one reason is that these sort of stereotypes persist, and by coming here and spreading the word and just kind of getting the facts out there, I think that's one thing that maybe we can make a little dent moving forward.
Okay, but when we had some conversations prior to this, there's a common denominator to both what you both said, which is there's clearly some issues of support. But what you had told me, Sarah, was how do you provide that support if you don't have a constant, which is housing and a contact and a stability to provide that support. So you really, need to have some type of infrastructure that allows you to provide those services, and maybe you can elaborate specifically to that.
Yeah, certainly. So just to kind of inform you all a little bit of kind of the models that, or the model that had been used previously when dealing with homelessness was, we need to fix the person. We need to fix the person and eradicate the addiction and prepare them and then provide them with housing. But life really doesn't work that way. It's really hard to get off of drug addiction, or get out of drug addiction rather. And it's very hard to really do anything for yourself when you don't have a place to sleep. I've spoken to women that use substances at night simply to protect themselves so they could stay awake through the night out of fear that they will be attacked. So it's very it's unreasonable and a little inhumane to expect people to turn their lives around while they have no support. So one of the new model that is being proposed, and it's something that our study supports and our data has shown, is that when you provide people with housing and provide a continuum of care permanently for the ones that need it permanently, that's really the only way to get these people housed and keep them housed.
Mark and Gabby, you literally saturated yourself with this issue for a number of years. How did it affect you? How did it affect your view of this entire problem? And where do you, I guess it was, how did it affect your life, and how did it change your view?
Now it's green. For me, it really showed me with the example of Judge Mitchell that it takes a personal commitment. And that's what I learned. You can't just show up once or twice and say, okay, I did my good deed and I'm fine. But it's a long-term commitment. And by doing the documentary, we got a lot of publicity, and we got people from the community that joined the running club and are mentoring the runners, and that is really making a difference. It's the personal commitment to be there for them. It doesn't need money. It just needs a kind word. It needs them they have to see that you take an interest, and that I think we learned. And I still like to go, and we are still going and run with the running club.
And just help me again with your first name. Sarah. The great thing about the running club is we understand people need housing. That's a baseline need. And the people in the running program largely live in the missions, be it the Midnight Mission, Union Rescue, LA Mission, etc. So that primary need is being met in a very rudimentary, somewhat problematic condition, but nonetheless. But it does enable people like myself, all the other mentors who are involved in the program, we engage in the endless counseling. All of those people that you saw that went to Rome, what is our objective? Our objective is to get them gainfully employed, to get them back into school. And the wonderful thing about the program is we have, not to toot my own horn, but we have a tremendous success. I can point to pictures of the faces in that movie and say, this person is now working here. Because we have a mentor who was able to contact a friend. There's another young man, James, who ran with us this morning. We have another supporter who said, if you give me 6 months of sobriety, I will put you into a restaurant as a chef. We have one other mentor who works for LA Tourism. Brian, you saw the young man holding the iPad as we were on the train up to Florence. Okay? Brian was homeless. Brian is now working 2 different jobs at an LA mentor program and working as an IT specialist for LA Tourism. But it's that combination of housing and resources that are so essential and that you need human beings willing to deliver on.
All right. The answer from this side is shockingly similar to the statement which I stole from that side, which I read earlier, which was, we must work together to solve homelessness. No one entity, including government, can solve this problem. We have to take some personal responsibility.
That's correct.
All right. The last question is really to the group as a whole, and I'm going to start on this side. You can look at the you can look at their executive report now. I'm not gonna judge you. You're welcome. Where do we go from here? How do we move forward?
So this report came out in the summer of last year, and there's already been a good amount of traction in Orange County specifically. And I know less about Long Beach, but it sounds like Long Beach is doing some of the things that Orange County really needs to be doing. So that's terrific, including building more affordable housing. That seems like a really basic thing. But for us, from our vantage point, I would say the need to destigmatize, like in conversations, just like, coming to events like this, seeing, films like this and hearing people's stories really goes a long way in sort of changing the way you think about, an issue like homelessness. So for me, at least, that would be one easy thing to do, and to get involved in, these town halls and board of supervisor meetings and things that happen. You may have read that multiple buses, were busing people into the Orange County Board of Supervisors meeting last week, to very little resistance from the other side of, folks like us who are coming to these events and, want to treat people experiencing homelessness with dignity and, humanity. So getting involved in that way, I think, is really important, and it's something, as academics, we definitely need to do better at.
But this is us starting to do that, huh? Yeah, and definitely I think, doing your part to change a lot of the misconceptions out there, so becoming informed and really trying to learn the facts. I think that can go a very long way, because there are so many myths out there and so many misconceptions of kind of, where the homeless are coming from, and they're not members of our community. Those things, just from what we found, are just not true. Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything Colin said.
Personal involvement, inspiration, giving people a second chance.
Yeah, I think one of the big things we learned from Judge Mitchell is, and I heard this in one of these TED Talks or something on a plane or something. This guy was talking about stuff, I think he was talking more about poverty, and he was saying, if you want to fix poverty, you have to get proximate. You have to get close to the problem. And this is what we learned from Judge Mitchell. He's close to this problem. He's there all the time. We finish the project, we go down there, he'll give us a little hello, but he is talking with these people, working with them, counseling them, legal advice, all kinds of things. And it's just this little attention. Gabi brings baked goods down there, and I hear people whispering, and Gabi doesn't hear it. They say, man, look what Gabi bought. Look at those brownies. That's gluten-free. Oh, my gosh. Look at that. There's a tablecloth on that table. And just these little things. They're people. They notice, too. They noticed these little things, too. And when poor Modi relapsed one time, I asked him, I said, Modi, what happened? You were 1 year sober. What happened? And he just looked and he just said, I got lonely. And this, if we had just reached out, one little lunch, we sometimes meet him for coffee. That's all you have to do. Get close to it. I can't build somebody a house, but although Ben did live with us for a month, But you just get close and you see the people that you saw in the film. They're worth, like Gabi said, they're worth a second chance.
Thank you. All right, so it's a school night, but what we're going to do is we're going to take 4 questions. You can ask whoever you'd like on the panel, and well, you know what? We're gonna just old school it. We're going to try a new policy tonight because sometimes people monologue a little bit on the question. So I will restate: a question is a question, not a statement. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm going to bring. Here's someone right here with a question.
Question. So this room is filled with people who are probably on board with you. How do we get people who are not on board with you to fill this kind of auditorium, see this movie? Because those are the ones who really need to hear this, feel this, smell it, taste it, touch it. Because, like I said, that's where we're falling short, right? And so how do we get there?
I think it's a combination of things. First, I think you have to convince folks that this problem can be effectively addressed, at least far greater than we are doing today. And that's where the studies of the 2 scholars to my left come into play. If we do certain things, we can reduce significantly the number of homeless in our communities. Okay? So I think for those people who want to influence policymakers, don't tell me that you're going to eradicate homelessness in 8 years. It's not going to happen. Okay? But can we significantly reduce the numbers? Yes, we can. And so what constructive steps can we take to do that? And I think the sociologists to my left have some real valid contributions to make in formulating those plans. The other thing is, I just hope that people can see the movie, that people can perhaps be involved in programs in churches, in community centers, in parks and recreation programs, where there is interaction between people who are trying to recover and, get off the street so they can see the beauty of the Rebeccas and Bens and Davids and everybody else, because I think that, I'm sounding like Barack Obama, but I think there is a capacity within most people, if they see good in another human being, they will be inclined to try and do the right thing. But right now, we are not seeing homeless people in a way that makes most people want to say, okay, that's a proposition that I want to commit myself to. Okay?
Judge Mitchell, the exact thing you said is why it's so critical for people like Mark and Gabby who made a film. I would challenge anyone in this room tonight to tell me I don't feel any different than when I came in here. You clearly had to be affected by what you saw tonight. And the medium of filmmaking can be critical to changing public opinion. We just need to get more people to see your film. So let's work on that.
Thank you. Tell all your friends.
Yeah, I live in Long Beach. My name is Dave Freeman, and I have to tell you, I cried through the whole movie. The whole movie. It was amazing. Congratulations.
Those are your pictures?
Pardon?
It's your photos?
Yeah, those are my photographs when you walked in.
Very impressive.
And I'm 76, and I retired. I've always been a photographer, and a year ago, I started photographing in Los Angeles, and just like the judge, it very rapidly consumed me. I felt fulfilled every day, and my heart was totally involved. And I spent the last 3 months at the Orange County Riverbed, and I was there all day today at the Civic Center. And I am a member of Housing is a Human Right, Orange County, 157 wonderful people that are truly dedicated to putting everybody in a house. My question, how do I get back all my conservative friends that I grew up in Long Beach that think I'm crazy and won't have anything to do with me?
If you read the paper that the scholars have produced, one of the figures that jumped out at me is if we don't do anything, we're going to spend $100,000 a year if we maintain the status quo. The figure that leaps out off of that piece of paper is if we can provide housing for those individuals, we cut that in half. Okay? Your conservative friends understand those economics. Okay? Ultimately, their tax liability is going to be reduced if we make the initial commitment.
I would also, all right. I would also add that we have another showing of this documentary Saturday at 11. Gabby and Mark will be here. So tell your friends, because that is one way to get more people to...
And some of the runners will be here too.
Some of the... There you go. Here you are.
Maybe Modi.
Hi. My concern is we saw a lot of addiction in the documentary, but we didn't really address the mental health issues. And that, I've tried to help a couple people myself and get them assistance, but it's difficult to get through them without like constant contact. So I'm wondering what, first of all, maybe Judge Mitchell and then the sociologists might have to say about the mental health component of homelessness. Thanks.
Probably the gravest concern that I have in terms of mental health, anyone who works with people who are addicted to methamphetamine understand that prolonged use of that drug, and it's probably the most prevalent drug out on Skid Row right now, prolonged use of meth causes meth-induced schizophrenia, and it is permanent. And there have been runners involved in our program who have relapsed, who continue to use meth, and at 22 years of age, they have suffered such grave mental impairment that their lives are effectively over. And that's why it is so essential, and I'll say this as a judge. We just changed the laws in the state of California. Used to be that possession of methamphetamine, it started out as a misdemeanor. It is, and then if you had multiple convictions for use of methamphetamine, it bumped it up to a felony. That's no longer the case. You can be arrested for the use of methamphetamine 100 times, and it is always going to be a misdemeanor. And anyone who is arrested for the use of methamphetamine, they come into the court system, they are arraigned, they are given credit for time served, and they are released. And it was all well-intentioned that we would somehow reduce the stigma or the penal sanction for people who use drugs. But what people didn't understand is when you reduced it from a felony to a misdemeanor, we no longer can induce a person to say, okay, if you go to an outpatient program, and you stay in that outpatient program for 6 months, then not only will it be reduced to a misdemeanor, the charge will be dismissed. And that was a tremendous incentive for people who were using drugs to at least try out treatment programs. That has virtually come to an absolute standstill. And it is a consequence of a good-intentioned change in the law that has, in my opinion, backfired tremendously.
to the general question of mental health, I would just add one of the things that we found by crunching the numbers is that the longer people stay on the street, the more physical and mental health problems they have. So, you know, from our vantage point, one of the easiest ways to sort of get at that is to get people off the street sooner rather than later. So, you know, one chronic condition doesn't turn into 3 a couple years later. So that was one of the things we found.
And to adequately answer that question, you and I can sit for the next 5 hours.
Well, I'm glad I'm the last question, because what I would like to know, over the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I have had multiple people tell me, as I've been talking about these issues in regard to the, the OC, what's going on down there right now. They've told me that this is a lifestyle choice for people. No, they're absolutely serious, no joke. It's a lifestyle choice. They're simply using alternative forms of housing, or they would prefer to be on the street rather than go with the rules of a shelter. Okay, so that whole general idea. Can you give me some language that I can walk out of here with to gently, kindly, lovingly rebut that argument?
Okay. Well, so I myself have interviewed over 100 homeless individuals in Orange County, and I have not had a single person tell me that if they were offered housing, that they would refuse it. I've never had someone tell me that they want to live on the streets. But the issue is very complicated, right? It's multidimensional. So people might not be willing to stay in a giant shelter with a bunch of mats on the floor, but they might be willing to take a small apartment with therapy services and an entire continuum of care. So it's really more nuanced than that. And so maybe you can share some of those things with them.
And I would just add, if you want to take a look at the executive summary, or you can read the full report online. There's lots of numbers if you want to start throwing them around at people, just in terms of what you think a typical homeless person might be. I think some of the numbers will be surprising. And so for example, substance abuse, yes, it is. It was probably 1 in 5 of the people we talked about or we interviewed. That was one of their primary causes of becoming homeless, but it was not number one. Number 1 and 2 were very closely tied together, and it was job loss and housing loss, one or both of those together. And the third cause was family issues, domestic violence or divorce or a death in the family. So like a lot of these little life things that could happen to any of us, but for some people, it's just, if you're right on the margin, right on the precipice, it's enough to sort of tip you over. So, we'd encourage you to take a look and see, maybe there's some, fun numbers you can start throwing at people and see what sticks. So.
And my work on Skid Row would suggest that is there a small percentage of the homeless population that is very resistant to get into housing? There is, okay? But my experience is, and you're the numbers crunchers, but at least 80% of the folks on the street don't want to be on the street. And so you can tell your friends, you can tell the people who espouse those ideas, yes, okay, that applies to a small fraction of the homeless population. But if we're going to address it in a meaningful way, let's look at the 80% rather than the 20%.
All right, that's going to end the formal part. Wait, I'm not going to cut you off, but it is going to end the formal part of our program. I'm going to ask them to stay. You can ask them questions as long as they're willing to stay, and no one's rushing out. But but I did say 4 questions, and I want to be respectful of people that do have to leave and get home. But
Thank you.
wait, before you leave, though, I do want to hold on. Oh, wait, 1 second. We handed out this executive summary that was prepared by Sarah and Colin, and I want you to read it. I want you to share it, and I want somebody to ask her the question that says, why don't we have a report? And maybe we do, and I just don't know about it. Why don't we have this report for Long Beach? Because it looks pretty darn good. It has great conclusions. We have the same problems. Let's come up with some solutions, and that would be your call to action. We need to move forward. This is a great map. That's why we handed it out. Thank you for coming.